Hey, would you look at that? We've returned to the show!
Wow! I wonder if this means he really likes us.
No, it probably means he just couldn't think of anything for the beginning of the episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cartoon Breakdown. I'm your host, the Animator. If there's one thing that Rocky and Bullwinkle has, is there's a special connection to the show that I happen to have. One day, my mother had gotten off of work and wanted to unwind. And what better way to unwind than watch Rocky and Bullwinkle? My dad at the time chose this opportunity to propose to my mother, and that's how they got married. This is something that has stuck with me throughout the years, and I thought it was a really cute idea, especially considering they both loved Rocky and Bullwinkle. As I grew up, I started loving cartoons as much as I did, remembering watching a few episodes myself and thinking on just how funny it was, and I started liking the show. The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends actually has ties to the first ever cartoon created for television, Crusader Rabbit. Jay Ward and Alex Anderson had both previously worked on the show Crusader Rabbit, and the show itself was revolutionary, as cartoons being created for television had never been done before. In fact, most of the cartoons before this time was created to be shorts shown between movies in theaters. This is where a lot of Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes cartoons came from. A lot of what made cartoons possible on a television budget was pioneered through the show, such as reusing cells by cleaning them up after they've been used for a shot, and limited animation, like having the mouth be the only thing that moves or the hand that's the only thing that moves. Crusader Rabbit lasted for 2 years, and as such, more cartoons for television was an inevitability. So Jay and Alex got started on creating their next cartoon. However, the original concept was much different than what they came out with. They had originally intended for a cartoon based on the idea of a group of animals that owned a television station called the Frostbite Falls Review. The show would have introduced several characters such as Oski Bear, Sylvester Fox, Blackstone Crow, Floral Fauna, and most interesting of all, Rocket J Squirrel and a Canadian Moose. Interesting enough, Frostbite Falls happens to be a fictional parody on a real-life city, International Falls, Minnesota. Sadly, the show never got past the initial pitch phase, as Alex lived in San Francisco and Jay lived in Los Angeles. Jay wanted to produce the show in LA, but Alex didn't want to relocate. So Jay had to hire another person, Bill Scott, to be the head writer. Eventually, Jay and Bill were joined with Chris Hayward and Alan Burns, and they would go on to create the show that we know as The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. The voice cast for the show consisted of June Foray as both voices for Rocket J Squirrel and Natasha, and of course you had Bill Scott playing the voice of Bullwinkle, and rounding out the cast is Paul Frees doing the voice for Boris. With the show in production, General Mills got involved and signed up to be the sponsor for the cartoon. Their stipulation was that the cartoon was going to air on a late afternoon so it could target more children easily. Initially, there were no animators for the show, as the advertisement agency for General Mills created an animation company in Mexico as it was more cost efficient to have animation done outside of the United States and then imported for the show. You know, I can't help but think that the phrase, "the more things change, the more they stay the same," applies in this situation. Unfortunately, though the cost for the animation may have been lowered, there were problems from the animation coming from the Mexican animation studio. Even though they were pulling out animation quickly, there were errors that plagued the show, and was not seen until the episodes were aired. Despite all of this, the show was a success, and to further promote the show, Jay Ward in 1962 went on a campaign to adopt Pennsylvania into the U.S. statehood as the 52nd state. They even went as far as to try to purchase an island that borders Canada and the United States in Minnesota. Unfortunately, no one was willing to sell their lands in the Lake of the Woods country. However, they were able to find someone who would lease their island to them for up to 3 years for $1,500. The campaign made stops in 22 cities and wound up at the door of the White House. But unfortunately, at the time, the Cuban Missile Crisis was in full swing and no one at the White House had any time for humor, so they were turned away. Season 1 of the show started November 19, 1959 and ended May 6, 1960, with 26 episodes. Season 2 picked up September 11, 1960 and went on until June 10, 1961, adding 52 more episodes and getting the show to syndication status. The show's third season started September 24, 1961 and lasted until January 28, 1962, with 20 more episodes. Season 4 started June 8, 1962 and went on until August 12th of that year with only 11 more episodes. The fifth season started August 26th of 1962 and went on until July 5th, 1963, adding 21 more episodes and leaving the show's total 130. As for watching the show nowadays, the only place I can find it is on Amazon, where you can find seasons 1 through 4 streaming for $2 an episode. You can also find the DVDs on Amazon, but be prepared to shell out a pretty penny, as the lowest I've seen it for season 1 is $50. The fifth season is running for $139. So your best bet would be to get the show on Amazon streaming for $2 an episode and forego ever seeing the fifth and final season. Now, depending on where you go, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends are either a show with 5 seasons or 2 series, with the first series having 2 seasons and the second series having 3. On Wikipedia, the entire series has 5 seasons and is The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. On IMDb, you have 2 shows that make up the series, the first being Rocky and His Friends with 2 seasons, and the second series being The Bullwinkle Show, having 3 seasons. Either way, they're both the same show, and the animation studio didn't change. The show is remembered fondly, despite some of the animation errors. Or maybe it's because of the animation errors that it's still remembered today. It didn't take itself too seriously and had jokes that were a commentary on the political climate at the time, and yet was still easily accessible to children. In 2000, there was a live-action movie that starred the Rocky and Bullwinkle characters coming into the real world. They even got the original voice actor June Foray to reprise her role as both Rocky and Natasha. The movie's not considered very good by a lot of critics. However, I do agree with the nostalgia critic that the movie itself is very much an homage to the original show, as the movie didn't take itself too seriously, and a lot of the jokes that you heard on the movie you could actually hear in the show. As I mentioned before in my Darkwing Duck episode, Disney was going to make a show based around the Rocky and Bullwinkle characters. However, they didn't have the rights to do so, and scrapped it in favor of Darkwing Duck. I do have to admit, it would have been very interesting to see Disney take the idea of making a Rocky and Bullwinkle show and keeping the characters in the mind of children even to today. Who knows? Maybe someday Disney will acquire the rights to Rocky and Bullwinkle and create the show they had originally intended so many years ago. I, for one, am looking forward to that. I would love to see Rocky and Bullwinkle return to relevance and be introduced to a whole new generation of children. Thank you for sticking with me through the end of the episode. If this was your first time watching Cartoon Breakdown, welcome. I would appreciate it if you would check out my channel and subscribe. You can watch my other videos, as I have plenty more to say on other cartoons there. As always, I'm your host, the Animator, and this was Cartoon Breakdown. I wonder what the next episode is. South Park? Oh boy. What's Tom going to do? Is he going to be able to make it through the review or quit halfway through? Find out on the next exciting episode in Hear the Sleigh Bells Ring or Silent Night, Deadly Night.